Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Suzanne Harris, and my listeners get the secret backstory behind every book. Joining me today is Ann Dinata, and she's here to tell us about her book, Twisted Roots, Standing Tall, My Journey to Heal, Learn, and Rise from the Trauma of Childhood Sexual Abuse. Ann is such a versatile person. She's an author, a speaker, an artist, a poet, and an advocate for awareness of sexual violence. She was left as an orphan. She was also destitute at around the age of 16. She transcended her trauma to attain an education, and she has become a successful businesswoman and world traveler. Today, Ann is a healer whose purpose is to inspire others to heal their lives and to bring more light and love into the world for the benefit of all humanity. Ann has traveled, written poetry, and painted in so many countries. Her art reflects the spiritual world of exotic locations and unique cultures. She writes poetry that's related to her art. She's studied with international teachers, and she's exhibited her work in Canada, the United States, as well as internationally. Ann, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to welcome you today to Books on Air. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Well, thank you, Susan. It's equally my pleasure to connect with a kindred spirit.
I know. We had so much fun talking to each other before we started to record. You know, when I first looked at your book, I was struck by the cover art, and I was struck by the title of the book. And I know that there's a story behind both of those. Would you share that story with our listeners?
Sometimes things are placed in your mind, was certainly mine, and you do not know why or what its purpose until you've worked through it. I think that was my case. Other than, this is rather sad to say, but being a victim, I didn't carry what you'd call unconditional love towards my children. My mother loved us, but we didn't share it emotionally. She did it through all the work she did for us. She sewed our dance costumes. She did a lot of preserves because she planted fruit trees and vegetables for us. She was a gardener. And I never knew my family. I didn't really have a family. We grew up with no relatives. And I knew because of my trauma, my children just weren't interested in that at all. And so I had hoped that maybe one day one of my 4 grandchildren might be interested. And a book was the only way. I hadn't thought of a video. Maybe I will, but I hadn't thought of a video to leave them. I think those who don't understand their past or their history are bound to repeat it. And that would be so sad for me.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's always, when someone has suffered a trauma, continuous trauma, as you did for an extended period of time, and come out on the other side of the trauma, often they will feel like they want to share the story of what happened because they feel that it's perhaps happened to someone else, and the sharing of that story, and for you, the wonderful healing process that you've gone through. I mean, I think this will be so valuable and so helpful for so many of our listeners.
Well, maybe halfway, a little bit towards 2/3 of the way through the healing process, I asked myself, why did this happen to me? What's the purpose? What's behind it? And what came up was quite astounding for me. It may or may not interest others. But it was, I went through this process to carry that transformation at a cellular level. And at a cellular level is where we connect deeply. And then in sessions with clients, I began to realize that they're not trusting the individual human me. They're trusting my energy. And often I prefer to work with no voice, just through energy and sensing. There's a deeper connection. So it was at a cellular level, and I am strongly, strongly connected in my energy field with the love of humanity. It's a constant with me.
It's a constant theme throughout your work as well. And I know that you journaled all your life almost. When did you first begin to journal?
Intuitively, I would say at 14, but factually it may have been after my parents died or in between there. I think it came about that I was brought up as a Catholic and I had nowhere else to go, no relatives, no neighbors, no one in the beginning. And so being brought up to pray, going inward, the writing maybe have been an extension of that.
Everyone talks about the power of writing down what's going on with us as an individual, how powerful that can be for us and how cathartic it can be for us. Did you find it that way as well?
Oh, yes. At some point, 3/4 way through the incest, I did connect with the priest. And I was living in Auckland for a while with my 82-year-old uncle. And I would spend my nights trying to study because I went back to school. And I would write these letters with tears in my eyes, for an hour or two, promising I would send the letter, but never did. So it's a feeling that there is a connection, that you're not totally alone in this world. And that's the truth, whether it's physical or non-physical. We are never alone.
Let's give our listeners an overview of the scope of the book of Twisted Roots Standing Tall.
Mm-hmm. You're asking me.
I know that's a hard question. Let's just, how would you describe it?
Well, it's basically a memoir. Kirkus Review, and I'm proud they said this, said it's actually 2 books. One is the events, experiences, and the physical world, but the other is a healing book. And I can relate to that because there was a period where I would go and read books about people who had some kind of disability and they had overcome it. I'm very attracted to the down and out kind of individual who undergoes tremendous challenges and somehow rises to the top and receives their accolades, their freedom, their bliss and abundance. And that's what, in my world, trauma offers.
I also know that you have a philosophy that rests on 2 tenets. One is exploring one's outer landscape, and the other is facilitating and validating the healing journey. Could you expand on those just a little?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing I happen to believe, knowing that before I die, I will leave all of these beliefs and patterns behind. I was told that the inner world is far vaster than the galaxy that we see. I happen to believe that. And the second thing is that everything that we are involved in creating, because that is who we are part of the divine, we are creators, starts in the inner world. And we get guidance every second of the day, and that comes from our external world. For me, our bodies are our laboratories. At the same time, they are our temples. But all we have to do is look and see and feel what's happening right now. And that's what's happening to the finest, most powerful parts of us, our energy world. I spent a lot of time and love to, and I'm right now surrendered 360 degrees by nature. And nature is our best teacher, in my opinion, as well as ourselves.
Oh, I agree. I agree. You and I talked about something that I think is fascinating, and I know that I would like to share this with the listener, and I think you would as well. Would you discuss light body?
Ah, yes. Think of it this way. Somebody has their heartfelt desire of, I want to build a house or a building or a bridge. And they may or may not have the, call it academic knowledge to start with from zero for themselves. So they may go to an architect. The architect is going to make a blueprint. We have a blueprint at our soul level of what we chose, in my opinion, to come in and accomplish. And that is in the energy field. There are a few people who are able to see this energy world. And I was very fortunate to have my best friend see this, and she saw it for years. And even though I had a lot of negative patterns, the fact that she could see my spiritual world was what kept her working for me. And then she became my partner. And so that a lot of people can feel their energy world. They can feel that the energy is tall or wide or thick. It's a matter of practicing if you so choose. I want to know at all levels who I really am. And we watched the development of my light body over many years. I want to say about 10. Once a week, we'd spend 2 to 3 hours, and I would raise my vibration, and I learned to compete with myself, and we watched it grow. And that was what was my turning point from basically moving out of being a victim and low self-worth to my spiritual world, because that was totally uncontaminated by any human being. And I'd had a lot of contamination. I hope that is the answer to your question.
It's perfect, because I think that the answer that you just gave is so valuable to someone who is damaged by whatever cause, whether it's a physical damage or mental damage or continuing damage to them, either physically or mentally. I think what you just described and the way that you talked about the transformation that gave you, I think that's extremely important. Would you like to share a reading from the book with our listeners?
Can I? Yes, I would love to, but can I just say one other thing?
Sure.
I had an oxygen star, and I worked with the 3 bases of life: light, oxygen, and water. Now, what happens, in my opinion, when a person goes through trauma, whatever it is, even if it's a teacher at school embarrassing you in front of the classroom, we collapse, we shrink, we withdraw. And what we're doing, we're withdrawing the space within us that we live in. Think of it as the 4 walls in a room. We actually pull these walls in and we deplete the life force, the spirit.